As dogs age, muscle loss can quietly steal mobility and quality of life. But what if science could help change that? Myos Muscle Formula with Fortitropin is an all-natural science-backed ingredient shown to help build and maintain muscle while reducing muscle breakdown with over a decade of research and real results. Because stronger muscles means more moments together. Myos, more time together.
Canine Longevity is presented by Myos Pet, the leaders in pet muscle health.
Today's episode of Canine Longevity, we actually have a live virtual teleconsultation with an actual patient. And joining us today is Willy Good Dog. And Willy Good Dog is a very well-known social media celebrity. And with us is Willy's owner, Chris. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. We really appreciate it.
No, I really honored to be here. Excited to have you both on the series. I'm going to go ahead, if it's okay with you. I'm going to share a keynote that has, what I did was I embedded your radiographs and videos and all those things, just would be easy to flip through. So I'm going to go ahead and share that with you if that's okay. This is what I classically do for all of our telemedicine consultations. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit share, and we'll bring this up. And let me know if you can see that.
Yep. Oh, it's awesome. Perfect graphics.
Awesome. Perfect. So once again, thank you guys so much for joining us. And, you know, when I'm going to do a telemedicine consultation, one of the most important things, and people don't really give enough credit to this, is history. You know, so what you saw that day, didn't see that day, what you were seeing leading up to that day of an injury, or some owners just notice, you know, slowly over time, I'm seeing we're slow to get up. Maybe we're having some challenge with the stairs. Maybe it was we opened the back door and we weren't running out after the squirrel. We came back in holding up a leg. Sometimes it's my canine buddy took out my other canine buddy, you know, and sometimes there's just legs that go in different directions at a dog park. And so, and then there's the dogs that do sports, you know, agility, and they go in the tunnel and they come out and they slip, petting the surfaces that they're on. If you can take us back now, so a little bit about, you know, the injury. You know, were you seeing anything even before that? Were we starting to slow down? Were there any signs of limping, kind of sitting odd? And then just kind of walk me through, if you would, what you saw.
Yeah. So Will, again, we work out 6 to 7 days a week. He has to be, here, guys, going to sit down. It's like, he has to be, he has to work out with me. Like, he wants to work out no matter what in the morning. He's waiting for me when I wake up. We had to go on a 21-day road trip for my company. So we take Willie and Jax with us everywhere we go. And we went to Greenville, South Carolina. No different. We woke up in the morning and did our workout in Greenville. And then at night, before we went to bed, we take him out for a walk, take him out to the bathroom.
But then I spotted this really cool bench and it obviously had to jump on it. From there, I ran down the hill like a professional athlete I am, and bam! My legs suddenly refused to touch the ground. I couldn't put it down, and my pawns immediately started panicking.
And all of a sudden, we saw him limping in that back right leg. Really weird. Nothing. I mean, other than he's 6, and you see sometimes and when he lays down at night, when he sits down, you can hear a little bit of like a groan. You can feel, you know, kind of a little bit.
Yeah.
Normal aging. I know I'm 55, and I feel kind of the same way sometimes at night before I go to bed.
Okay, so let out a little bit of a yipe, or just started limping, or
he started limping. He's not a vocal dog like that. I mean, he will do all kinds of crazy exercise with me that we usually do, and never says a word. So this was just all of a sudden we noticed when he got down, he was just limping on that right hind leg.
Okay, and that's important. And what's crazy about this breed is the breed for all things sports. You know, I don't think there's a dog sport out there, from agility to dock diving to flying frisbee, you know, you name it, herding, that this breed doesn't do. And they're extremely stoic. And so when I have a breed such as this that all of a sudden shows something, it's usually real. You know, it's usually real, because most of the time they just say, you know what, I'm going 11 out of 10. They'll just go through the wall and keep going. So when you see something in this breed in particular, you definitely pay attention to it. So then when that injury occurred, you kind of pulled back a little bit, rested for a few days, gave some medications. Walk me through what kind of transpired after that jump.
Yeah, it was on a Sunday night, so I had a big event for my work the next morning. So we right that next day we took him right to the local vet in Greenville. She took the X-rays and everything, and then we just rested him. Right, we knew we were going to be in the road for 21 days, so he was going to be in the car. So instead of me and every morning we do our mile or 2 mile run, do all of our exercise and everything, we just rested him. It was a good time to be there. And so we basically got his x-rays, got their kind of the prognosis, and then he's been off of it for, about 8 weeks now.
Okay. A few more questions. Medications wise, did they give you some pain medications, some anti-inflammatories?
Yeah. We got some anti-inflammatories right then, just some pain medication, just to kind of keep them kind of relaxed.
Okay.
And yeah, but that's all we had to do. And then like I said, we were on the road in the car in the hotel, so it wasn't too hard to do that.
Okay. Did you think that the pain medications, did you see that they were helping a bit, or was it hard to say because you were also sort of keeping everything on lockdown as far as activity was concerned?
I thought they worked very effectively the first few days. Again, he will not show any kind of emotion. So next morning he wanted to go run with me. He was that excited, but that calmed him down a little more. So I would say no, it was a perfect opportunity to take those pain medications, get him to relax.
Okay, perfect. So one thing you guys did, which is extremely helpful, and whenever I'm going to do a teleconsult with any clients, videos are so important. And I tell owners, I said, give videos all the time. Give videos of your dog just going for a walk. Get them going for a trot when you're out for one of your jogs, because that way you have a baseline to compare back to. And so many times you'll say, is that normal? And then you have pictures or a video you look back at. And so this was your video that you submitted from February 2026. And I'll go ahead and play this for everyone. And so when I watch this, the one thing we see is with that right hind leg, there's a shortened stride. You also see, if you look at kind of their little tushy area, their butt, we call it the gluteal region, you'll see this little bit of a hip hike that's occurring. And what that means is that, hey, something in that back leg, we don't know what, but something in that right rear leg says, I'm not quite comfortable. So we're taking a little bit of a shortened stride. We're also not putting full pressure on there. So this video, was this kind of what you were seeing on a daily basis, or was this the best it was, the worst it was?
For sure. I mean, again, we were on the road 21 days, so we saw this basically the majority of the trip.
Okay.
That was kind of his normal gait. Again, we stopped him from exercising, just low walks to go to the restroom and everything like normal. But that's kind of what we saw the whole time we were out there.
Okay. And that was a perfect video. So thank you so much for sending that. Now, most recently, this is the video I have. Actually, I just got it from you guys yesterday. And this is, again, a gait analysis. Thank you for the images are perfect. I usually have these dogs coming towards me or away from me or sideways. You captured all those things. And I'm going to play this one for you. And when we watch, again, look at that right hind limb. We're better, but if you see, there's just still a little bit of a hip hike there, and we're just shortened striding a little bit. Better weight distribution, though. If you look, we're putting better pressure on than we were in the first video, but still a little bit of a shortened stride on there. But I'd say greatly improved compared to the initial one. How do you think, as far as what you're seeing in this video, and what have you been seeing at home?
100%. Again, there's really no exercise. I'm walking him small strides every day, a couple of times a day, but I've seen a significant improvement over the last, almost 10 weeks.
Perfect. And for those of you watching at home, this is the absolute perfect gait analysis video. So outside, no distractions, in the grass. You can see where we're coming, where we're going, we're doing circles. So absolutely, on your own dog, capture these videos and keep them. So in case down the road you think something's up, you always have those to compare to. So then you went to your veterinarian after this episode and took these radiographs. And these are actually very, very good radiographs. And this is of the hips, what we call pelvis or the hips. And I'll just walk you through it. Can you see my cursor okay?
I can. Yep.
So this is us laying on our back. This would be our tail. This is our pelvis right here. This is our spine going up here. And this is actually our hip. Now, with us laying on our back, that makes this our left hip. And that makes us this our right hip. These hips are gorgeous. Literally what we would say OFA excellent. So the balls are seated well in the socket. There's no signs of arthritis. Genetically, these are exactly what you want to see. As we follow these down, we just catch some of the knee. To me, on each one of these sides, I think the knee looks okay. A little bit of an off angle. And so then your veterinarian went ahead and took a straight view for us. And so this really is what's a bit telling. Again, the hips, these are what we call OFA views. They're beautiful, perfect hips, ball and sockets. Love these. I work my way down to the knee. Here's the kneecap on both sides. That looks good. This is the femur. This is the tibia. We call this the fibula out here. And there's these little things or fibula that's out here. And then these little circles, we call these fibulas basically. And this one, they should look like this little circle. And all of a sudden I'm looking at this guy, and I'm like, well, that looks a little bit odd. And I look at this one, I'm like, that looks a little odd too. But again, he's focused here primarily on the hips. So if we blow this up, this is what we should see in a normal dog. So this is the front view, we call it craniocaudal or AP, of a normal dog's knee: femur, tibia, fibula. There's a little fibula. There's a little fibula. That's your kneecap. So basically, think of these like little peanut M&Ms that are living on each side. And we'll talk about why they're important here in a bit. If we look now and I blow up the front view of what your veterinarian took, all of a sudden, there's my M&M, okay? But look at this guy. It looks like somebody took a hammer and just kind of put a mallet right onto the M&M. It kind of looks a little bit fractured or broken. But then I go over to the good side. This is the left side. And look at that. That looks a little abnormal too. Now, the thing with the front view x-rays, this is, bone over bone, so it can be a little bit misleading. So that's why I always say to owners, or veterinarians, always take two views. Get the front view and then get a side view as well. So if we now look at the side view of a normal knee, here's our femur, kneecap. This is our tibia. This right here is what we call the kneecap tendon. Okay, and there's your kneecap again. And here's those M&Ms, right? Or peanut M&Ms. You can see they're nice and round and smooth is what we want to see. If I blow up Willy Good Dog's knee, this is the right knee, you can see here's one of those. That's the one that lives on the inside. But look at this one. There's a fracture through this. Here's part of it and here's part of it. It's kind of broken down. And so that's what we call the fibula. And that one has a bit of a fracture, what we call bipartite, or an injury to it. And we'll talk about that in a second. So that's the right knee. I always say to veterinarians, get the other one to compare. Is this just an incidental finding? Is this real? Was it an injury? Well, here's Willy Good Dog's good knee, if you would, the left knee. And look at that one. You can see even more changes in the left side compared to that little M&M down there. It looks normal. So you're going to say, well, what in the weird is that? And why is that so important? Well, if we think about our knee and their knee, we call it a stifle in a dog. There's your femur. There's your kneecap. Here's your tibia. Okay. And there's a little bit of fluid in here. We call it a fusion. And that's something that we're going to talk about as well, because fluid in a knee can be inflammation, can be normal in some dogs, but it can be inflammation. We'll tell why. But this big structure right here, you can see it goes down here. That's your Achilles tendon, which then comes up, and there you've heard of your calf muscle. It's a really big muscle, your gastroc, we call it. And look where it attaches, right up where these little guys are here. That's one of the attachment sites for your entire calf muscle and your Achilles tendon. Okay, so if we look over here at just this anatomy picture, cartoon illustration, you can see it starts up here behind the bone, right where that is, and it works its way down all the way to the heel. Okay, just like it would in us. So you can imagine then it's got an important job when it comes to walking, running, especially jumping. And, we talk about that. So those little guys, those little peanut M&Ms, we don't give them enough credit. And especially it makes sense then when we think about, we jumped down off a park bench, what could have potentially happened? So these little bones behind the knee, they're normal. Sometimes they look irregular on an x-ray, and that can be normal. But when you see them in both sides and they're kind of broken apart, we say, is that trauma or is that something we were born with? And if we were born with it, it's still an abnormal M&M, which then means it's predisposed to injury is what that means. So it's an attachment for that calf muscle, and it's really stressed during what do we have right here? Running, jumping, and landing. So it was the absolute perfect storm that we were up on a bench and we just probably zigged when we should have zagged, landed kind of weird, and put some, increase what we call biomechanical load or stress on that calf muscle. And then it pulled on that little structure that was there that wasn't perfectly normal to begin with. So it was kind of the chicken or the egg. And we wondered, this could have possibly been brewing. And then it was that last little jump that we took that kind of made this happen. So in that area, you not only have the calf muscle, you have some other things, little ligaments and other structures that attach away there as well. So we don't give enough credit to that little teeny tiny M&M that lives behind our knee, but definitely that can make them very, very lame, uncomfortable. They look good when you rest them. As soon as you take them back to running or jumping or agility or any of their sports, they're off again. So this is something where, boy, and it's not always on our list of rule-outs. And your veterinarian did such an amazing job, caught those other views, and we could see it in there, especially when we blew them up. So what in the world are our next steps? And I know this is something that seems totally, outer space to you and to many veterinarians as well. And again, he'll get a report and I'll be calling them about these findings. So we need to find out if that's a source or if it's the other issue, because I know your veterinarian was saying, oh, I'm worried a little bit about the ACL, what we call a CCL in dogs, and maybe it was a sprained ACL or even a torn ACL. So what I would say the next step is for this is you'll head back to your veterinarian or into your local rehab therapist or whoever you're doing as far as, conditioning and rehab. And we're going to actually have them now evaluate that. We're going to have them palpate it. Because again, I can't diagnose these things over, virtual. I wish I could put my hands right there on Willy Good Dog right now and feel that area. So I have to work through them and say, hey, put your finger right over that little area of the fibula and see if there's sensitivity. And luckily it's on both sides. We can compare left to right. If they say, yeah, you know what, there's some sensitivity back there, next step is I would do an ultrasound, just a simple ultrasound. We don't need a CT scan. We don't need an MRI. Ultrasounds are, you can do those awake. You can pair left to right. You can put the leg through range of motion, way less expensive, no anesthesia. So I tend to reach for MSK ultrasound. Then if they say, yeah, you know what, there is some inflammation back there. There's definitely, some damage to where that calf muscle attaches to the bone. And we say, well, we're going to try to rehab it. So these are things like laser therapy or photobiomodulation, shockwave therapy, manual therapy, exercises you can do at home to try to get that inflammation down and make that more functional. And if your physio says, or your rehab therapist you're working with, or your veterinarian says, you know what, it's still sensitive, it's just not healing the way I'd like it to, then we would actually do an injection. And we would actually do an injection, what we call regenerative medicine. And that can be what's either called PRP or stem cells. And we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So does that make sense as far as the actual fibular injury? I know that's really new to you, something that's new to a lot of veterinarians. We don't see it that often, but you do see it.
Yeah, it's exactly. I was so surprised when you said that. I was worried about more of a bigger tear, but I think that, like I said, he's a working dog for the last 6 years. He's been, always working out with me, jumping up on things, and like I say, he's like a parkour dog. When I'm running, he's got to jump up on a bench and jump down, and kind of do that on a regular basis with me.
So if you think about it, it was just that kind of a little bit of that perfect storm, straw that broke the camel's back. It was just that one jump. There was probably already a little inflammation there, and then we tweaked it, if that makes sense. So probably a mild, what we call strain at that location, but definitely stay on top of that with some physio and diagnostics down the road if we need it. So the other concern your veterinarian had initially from the report I had as well was what we call ACL injury or CCL injury in the dog. That is the most common injury in dogs worldwide. Worldwide, the most absolute common. And when we were talking about as well with the injections, we're going to come back to this also, but this is something where when you have that fibular issue or you have these early partial tears, and we'll talk about this, regenerative medicine is something they use very, very commonly. Started way back in horses. They use it in humans. We use it in dogs as well. And so if when they evaluate that little fibula, they say, we're not seeing total improvement there in an ultrasound, there's still some little tear injury to the muscle or the tendon, then we say, let's do an injection. And what PRP is, it's where you draw a blood sample. You spin it down a centrifuge and it pulls out platelets. And platelets are very, very potent as far as being anti-inflammatory. They actually bring in blood supply. They help with tissue healing, remodeling. So they can be very, very potent as far as trying to get these types of injuries to heal. Now, one step further, if we say, this tear is a little bit more and we just keep doing rehab and we can't get it to resolve, then you can actually go to what we call stem cells. And this is where you take some tissue from the dog, usually a little bit of fat sample or a little bone marrow sample. We usually use fat, just a little keyhole. And you get those stem cells and mix it with the PRP and you make a cocktail basically. And then you do the injection and then you have the best of both worlds. Now, when they do that injection, you can see here this image to the left, it's under ultrasound and you have to hit the bullseye, because if the injury is right here, which you can see, you got to make sure that needle gets there and you're getting the PRP and the stem cells right into that injection. So really, really important. Again, that's way overkill. We know that we have the fibular issue. We send you off to do some, physical therapy or rehabilitation therapy, we call it in the vet space, and then some check-in there. And if down the road we don't see that it's improved, okay, we have injections available if we need it. Now back to this guy. ACL injury, you probably know somebody that's had an ACL. It's the most common injury also in people that do sports like football, skiing. You saw what happened in the Olympics not so long ago. And very, very common with dogs. Like I mentioned, billion industry. It's crazy. And that was back in 2003. So you can imagine now it's just such an incredibly common injury in these guys. And if we look at dog anatomy, I'm sure this is familiar for you as far as a human as well. Upper bone, femur, kneecap, tibia. Remember, those M&Ms lived right back here, so they had that important job we just talked about. Here's what we call the ACL in a person. That's your CCL in a dog. And don't forget, we don't give enough credit. There's one that goes the opposite direction called the PCL. This is one of those breeds, because they can spin on a dime, they turn like a Ferrari. They can actually not uncommonly injure this ligament. Classically, house pets, companions, it's the ACL or CCL that injures, but a lot of these sporting dogs, because of the way they can turn and jump and spin and their athleticism, it's this one that they can injure. So a lot of components to it, what we call a stifle in a dog or a knee in a person. Now, when we think about it, we think of like, oh, we tore it. You and I were skiing, skis went this way, we went that way. Or Willy Good Dogs at the dog park got taken out by a big dog and that knee goes. And then there's our tear. But what we don't realize is we can just have little micro tears, like a sprain. We can have what we call a partial tear, or that catastrophic, East Coast, West Coast, completely teared, and that's your tore, and that's your grade 3. So there's all different variations. And your veterinarian was worried about this early tear, these partial tears, we call it. If they have a complete tear, unfortunately, that's where you're looking at full surgery, plates and screws and cutting the bone. And luckily for Willy Good Dog, that's not something we're looking at. When that happens, some people say, oh my Lord, are these dogs ever going to be the same? And the good news is with that, they can get back to sport. Now, we know Willy Good Dog doesn't have a complete tear. Your veterinarian already assessed that. But for those that have to go down that route or are watching this right now, if your dog has a complete tear and ever needs knee surgery, like a TPLO, they can get back to things all the way up to agility, which is really, really good to see. But this is where we are with Willy Good Dog. It's these challenging ones where we say, wait a minute, we have good days and bad days. Sometimes we were walking really well. When we sit, maybe we're sloppy sitting a little bit. Sometimes we're not sitting like a beautiful obedience dog. That leg just kind of kicks out. We look good on a hike or a run with you. And later that night we get up and we're kind of offloading or a little stiff. You're like, you were good yesterday. Why are you off today? So it'll drive you absolutely crazy. You go into your veterinarian's office and they feel the knee. They're like, there's a little discomfort there, but I don't feel that classic instability that we feel with an ACL or CCL injury, but there's some inflammation there. When they feel the front of the knee, they're like, yeah, there's some fluid on this knee. So this is one of those where you say, well, what do we do with this? So you rest them, you put them on some anti-inflammatories. They look awesome. And you go back to running with them again and you're like, oh, here we go again. It's still not where it should be. So the first thing we do is exactly what your veterinarian did. You get those films. Okay. And this is a different dog, but you can see there's all this gray that's up in here. This is fluid on the knee. That's what your veterinarian saw as well on Willy Good Dog. That's what we could see in the x-ray. So not only were these M&Ms okay in this dog, but there was fluid. For Willy Good Dog, we knew the M&Ms weren't happy, the fibella, and there was also fluid on that right knee as well. So one thing I want people to take away from this as well is if you have a dog that's stiff, gets up in the morning, kind of on again, off again, dog sits, one knee may be, uncomfortable or has some fluid on it or other joints, make sure we look at tick panels, tick titers. And, dogs like Willy Good Dog, they're traveling all over the country and other countries. And you may say, well, I'm in a state that doesn't have ticks. Well, it's hard to look at this chart and find a state in the United States that doesn't have a tick. They're kind of everywhere. So once a year, I recommend that every dog owner just get titers, just make sure they're negative, because that can cause them to have that little bit of inflammation or some discomfort, or even just, what we call stiffness in one joint. They're not febrile. They don't stop eating. They don't look sick. Sometimes they're just a little slow to get up, a little sore or stiff. And you could think that was just because you had a good workout yesterday. So absolutely run that. Now, your veterinarian was awesome, ran it, and it was negative. So you can put a big check in that box. So thank them very, very much for running that titer. The next thing, remember, we were talking about ultrasound. So not only can they do an ultrasound of the fibella, those little M&Ms, while they're there, they can look for me at the ACL or the CCL and see if there's some damage there. Okay, so this can actually show up on ultrasound very nicely. If we see that, yep, there is some inflammation still there, when they're rehabbing the fibella and the gastroc or calf muscle, guess what? It's just the front of the knee. I want them to also do that with the laser or the photobiomodulation into that area where the ACL would be as you do the exercises as well. Now, If this lameness continues, so Willie Goodell is looking pretty good right now, and you're doing rehab, and if all of a sudden you're like, man, this just keeps coming back. We're going for our runs again. Willie Gooddog's working out with me again, and seems like we're just off in that leg. Then we would actually step it up and say, let's go scuba diving and really get a better look at this ligament and what's going on. And these are teeny tiny little needle scopes about the size of like a needle that we would use, 1.9 millimeters. And let's go scuba diving. So this is a dog, it's a sporting dog. And I'm going to play this video. And what you're going to be looking at in a second, this shiny area right here is healthy ACL or CCL. And all this fluffy stuff here, this is a partial tear. This is a dog that can run, jump, do agility, but periodically just looks off, rests, non-steroidals, looks great, and then is off again. So if we play this video, what you're going to see is as I'm just gently palpating this, here's all the area that's torn. There's some inflammation right there. The majority of this structure is intact. So this is those early partial stable tears, what your vet was worried about, an early partial tear, basically. So very, very common. So the question is for these dogs, you've tried rest and non-steroidals, you've tried rehabilitation therapy. If it keeps coming back, the question is, can we use regenerative medicine, just like we talked about for the fibula? So once again, can we take our PRPs, get that blood sample, spin it down? Can we get our stem cells, that fat sample, which has the ability to help tissues? Basically, the way I look at stem cells is they're a conductor of the orchestra. Hey, I need some blood supply. I need this tissue to turn on. The resident stem cells that are in there start to heal these tissues. So it's really conducting the orchestra, making these tissues heal. And the PRP is sort of the ability for it to upregulate and help the stem cells work. So we wanted to see years ago, could this be something beneficial for dogs? We had known that they've been doing this in humans. We saw the animal models. We knew that there were some publications in dogs, and we kept seeing these dogs that were coming in with exactly what Willie Gooddog had, this knee that just kept bothering them. And these were dogs coming from all around the country, everywhere from Oregon to Washington State to California, Texas, and many of them were agility. And you can see, look what's overrepresented up here as far as the breed. Border collies, way out there, and our Aussies and all these other breeds, the very, very active ones. So a lot of these were sporting, but 28% of these were dogs that were companions, but they run with the owner, they hike with the owner, they work out with the owner. And you can see, look at that, right knee more common than left knee. It fits right into what you're saying, just like we're left-handed or right-handed. So same thing with Willie Gooddog, more so in the right leg. So we went ahead and we did stem cells and PRP. We looked at half of them getting fat-derived stem cells and half of them getting bone marrow, just to see if there was any difference between the two groups. And we found they worked equally well. And this is just an example of a dog just like Willie Gooddog, super athletic. This is actually a Team USA World Team dog named Cool. And Cool had the same injury. Now, when these dogs come in to see me, either at my West Coast or East Coast location, I had them walk down a mat, and these are their little footprints. And in a dog like Willie Gooddog, both forelimbs should be 30-30, both hind limbs should be 20-20. Well, you can see with Cool, we're taking all of our weight off of this left one and putting it to the front legs. That should be 20. Well, if we look after the stem cells and the PRP, Cool flew back to us from Seattle. Here we are at 20. Okay, so much better weight distribution. So when we looked at the before and after, so here was the original injury, the partial stable tear to Cool's ACL or CCL. 90 days later, when Cool came back to walk down the mat and have us assess, we took that little needle scope, just took a quick peek. You can see the nice fibers that we have here as well. And the good news about these early partial stables, if you catch them early, like your veterinarian did and like you did, we can get these dogs back to performance and back to sport. So this is the perfect scenario where you caught them early. They don't need a full TPLO surgery. We're trying to get these dogs back in a more conservative, holistic approach. So, just like in Willie Gooddog, you're way ahead of the curve, which gives us so much opportunity as far as our treatment options. And like I was mentioning before, now this is something they commonly do in humans. So this is the same exact type of cocktail, if you would, that we used in our paper, our second publication, where they looked at what we call BMAC. They looked at PRP, and they found statistically significantly in humans with these ACL injuries, they could get them back as well to healing. So what are our next steps? And I know that is a lot. We talked about this M&M injury or these fabelas. We talked about these early partial stable tears that your veterinarian was worried about. And this is a lot to unpack. So I'm not going to make you memorize this. Don't worry, you're going to get a full report. Your veterinarian gets a full report. I send a report to your rehabilitation therapist. But let's just say, here's your marching orders, if you would. the first thing, I would love your veterinarian or your rehab therapist just to palpate those M&Ms. Okay, feel the one on the right, feel the one on the left, compare them, see if there's some sensitivity. Okay, if there still is some sensitivity, we may say, hey, maybe we should look at this with ultrasound. While they're looking at that, I want them to feel that knee again or the stifle to see if there's still some fluid there. Okay, is there still some inflammation? Is there still some knee discomfort throughout range of motion? And if we say, you know what, there is, I'd like them to do an ultrasound. Okay, so they're going to look at that gastroc where it attaches at the M&M. They're going to look at the CCL and see, is there still some inflammation? Is there still some areas of, that we could, help further with rehab or things like that. So then you'll go into rehab if they still see that's active. So laser therapy, shockwave therapy, we call it manual therapy. You'll have some exercise you do at home as well. And then we send you back to activity. You're going to start working again, your CrossFit, all the things you do, hiking. And if all of a sudden you're like, you know what, it's back again, then what I'm going to want to do is take that little teeny tiny needle scope, slide that into the knee and say, okay, how bad is this CCL or PCL, and would we benefit from regenerative medicine? And if we would, get our little fat sample for the stem cells, get our blood sample for the PRP, and then if we're injecting the knee, we'd also inject that area up around the calf muscle where that fibella is to help that with healing as well. So I know that's a lot of stuff, and you'll get a report, but this is something where it's the chicken or the egg. And you did an amazing job. Your veterinarian did an amazing job with the workup, and now we have a plan. Okay, so I think at the end of the day, the important thing to take away is this is going to be a lifelong thing, right? We were most likely born with this since we have this little guy here and the same thing over here. It'd be odd to injure both of these at the exact same location. So this is going to be important from a standpoint of warm-ups, cool downs, just like you do. When you work out, what do? You do your active warm-ups, you do your exercise, you do your passive stretching afterwards as part of your cool down routine. Same thing I'm going to be having you do with Willy Good Dog, just to keep that calf muscle, what we call the gastroc, and the CCL healthy and happy and functional without it, because this is going to be a long-term maintenance that you guys are going to be doing together. This is Dr. Sherman Canapp here with Canine Longevity. And at the end of the day, I think one of the most important things we learned from this virtual consultation is that it's all about an appropriate diagnosis and a team approach, because just like Willy Good Dog, it's about getting back and having orthopedic wellness and sport and performance longevity. Chris, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. And Willy Good Dog, it's been a pleasure. Keep me posted.
Sounds great, Dr. Canapp. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good girl, Fachi.
Canine Longevity is presented by Myos Pet, the leaders in pet muscle health.